Apple is one of the most successful companies in the world, selling things like the iPhone, AirPods, or the iPad, but not everything they release turns to gold. Over the years, they've had some pretty big fails, and well, their next big thing, Apple Intelligence, might be the next one. In 1983, Apple released the Apple Lisa. It was one of the first ever personal computers with a graphical user interface. But it cost $10,000, which today, that's like buying a $30,000 computer. Plus, it was pretty slow, so it completely flopped. Then, later, Apple released the Apple Newton. This was a PDA, or a personal digital assistant, which had a stylus and was made to replace your notebook. The issue is, it was pretty chunky, and a regular notebook was just easier. The Newton was discontinued by 1998, and Apple was struggling. In December 1996, Steve Jobs finally returned, releasing hit after hit with things like the iPhone and the iPad, but not everything was perfect. Do you remember the iPod Hi-Fi? Most people don't. But back in 2006, Apple released a speaker for $349. Steve Jobs called it a home stereo reinvented, but it was big, chunky, and just worse than the competitors. So 18 months later, they canceled it. This is a lot like the original HomePod, which had pretty much the same story. Those all happened a long time ago, so I didn't ever recognize any of those products that flopped, but there are a lot of products that I do recognize, and I think a lot of you will too. In 2015, Apple released the Butterfly keyboard, which was thin, sleek, and always broken. Basically anything could get in and jam up the keys, but Apple insisted that it was better for 4 years, until finally they admitted that it was worse and went back to the scissor keys. People literally sued Apple for this keyboard, so Apple had to pay out millions. Then there was Apple Maps, which came out in 2012, but it was so bad, Tim Cook actually came out and made a public apology. People were getting lost, airports mislocated, and cities just gone. And who remembers AirPower, the charging mat that they promised but never made it into production? Apple hyped it up like crazy in 2017, but in 2019, they'd actually just cancel it because they could not figure it out. And now in 2025, Apple's trying something again called Apple Intelligence, which is basically their version of AI. But here's the thing, so far it already looks like a flop. I was expecting some super cool ChatGPT killer, but instead we got summary tools and an emoji maker. Apple Intelligence doesn't even run on most iPhones. You have to have either the iPhone 15 Pro or any of the newer iPhones. When Apple initially released Apple Intelligence, there were a few features that seemed like it could really change the way you use your iPhone. Things like a better Siri that could see anything you have on your screen and remember all the conversations you've had. But recently, Apple's actually come out delaying these features. In fact, Apple had an ad for Apple Intelligence showing a girl ask Siri who she went to dinner with a few nights ago, and Siri was able to remember it and actually tell her. And now that Apple's delayed this feature, they've removed this ad and completely changed their website, making it seem like this didn't exist. Apple Intelligence was just released with nothing ready. So just like the Apple Maps app, nobody's gonna trust Apple Intelligence because it's bad at the beginning. Oh, and did I mention Apple Intelligence is actually just ChatGPT? All these writing tools are just ChatGPT. I mean, you can even go into the Apple Intelligence section in settings and sign in to ChatGPT. So it's weird because Apple's actually rumored to bring in their own large language model, but now they're helping their competitors while at the same time making their Apple Intelligence look really bad. So it's just weird. Look, Apple does have a lot of flops in their history, but the thing is, usually Apple does learn from it and it turns into something pretty good. Sometimes a flop is just the beginning of something great. The Newton failed, but it kind of paved the way for the iPhone. Apple Maps at first was a disaster, but now personally, that's the only one I use. So maybe one day Apple Intelligence will be amazing, but right now it just seems like a really cool name slapped on features that we've kind of seen before. So the question is, will Apple Intelligence be another flop that turns into something great, or should I just give up on a usable Siri? Hit that like button if you've ever owned one of these Apple flops, and maybe subscribe for more Apple content.